Okay, welcome everybody. We're here for the Stacks Governance Call. Good to have the working group with us again. I think this is the 59th session we've had together. It's always a beautiful thing to see y'all, hear y'all voices, catch up, and get updated on all the goings on. So let's get into it. Let me see if I can share my screen decent enough. Okay, so we usually start with these stand-ups. We can get a little glimpse of what everybody's working on currently, or maybe what some things that have been working out in the past, maybe related to governance. Even if it's not related to governance, maybe can find a way to pull it in here. It'd be nice to hear what folks are getting into. But yeah, I can start it off, I guess. We've been working pretty good at coming together around a code of conduct for the advocates, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we're ready to get that up on the GitHub for the advocates repo if it's not already. It's some really good sessions figuring out the language there. Myself and Haas have had some really good sessions. Not necessarily this week. I think Haas is trying to get his sleep schedule right, but in the previous week, we got really into some good weeds around what a consensus flow can look like for the advocates in terms of decision-making structures. And, part of the weeds we got into were, some of the difficulties of, the time zones being so far away that we'll inevitably have some important decisions that folks can't necessarily come together real time. It may be literally impossible for them to come together real time. Especially consistently. And so we started to pull from some of the indigenous protocols that are real-time council processes and find ways to encode them into what could be, text-only threads, but can have some responsibilities attached to the different folks involved in terms of creating a form of legitimacy. Just little nuances of, would be the equivalent of head nods or being able to see that somebody's participating in real time. We need some of that same legitimacy for what may be something's going on chain from that consensus flow. It might be text threads. And so, but there's very interesting ways, the council process will sometimes have folks sitting in a very certain position. There's obviously clan functions that play into what responsibilities might be in play in terms of a text thread. So that's some of the ways we're thinking about it, and it's kind of exciting. But I'll shut up there and to shorten my stand-up and see what other folks are getting into. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll likely be fleshing out some of the implementations for this consensus flow. So you guys should be seeing some of that as we head towards the middle of February. Blockers to that, I would imagine, would be some important sessions we need to have with the advocates in terms of some of this design, right? Some of this clan design, getting folks into temporary clans and whatnot. So some of that exciting stuff would be coming up, I think, in the next few weeks or, a couple of weeks. So yeah, I'll shut up for real this time. But yeah, anybody else who wants to give a share, a stand up of anything they've been working on, please do.
All right, I got a quick one I can throw out there. So just been working through same issues as before, mainly looking at how we're going to catch up the notes and everything else, but haven't had a lot of time to put into it just with a few other things going on and everything else. But definitely still on my radar and something I'm paying attention to. And hopefully, you and I, Harold, I think we got to touch base and do a little more as well. But that's basically my biggest blocker right now is time with some of the things going on. But I do want to make this a focus again. So, I thought at the very least, I wanted to be here today and hear what everybody else is up to. That's all for me.
Thank you, Mike. No, beautiful. I saw you made a mention of a pull request and getting some things in Target. And yeah, I know Jenny is still maybe a little bit unavailable for some of those older recordings for the next week or so. but I think I mentioned, and we may get to it later on, I don't know, a little bit further, but you know, I'm stacking up my own recordings now in recent months, and I don't know if it's possible if we can work backward, but you know, we can start with that if it's possible. You know, the more recent meetings that we've had, and yeah, maybe find a way of the best way of sharing and all of that. Maybe it's a first step forward, but I'm here, man. Just let me know. Thank you kindly for still, you know, prioritizing it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and actually that's a great point, because what we could do is we could take what you have and just kind of like walk through the process so you can see a little bit about how it works across the SOP and like what it's like to update these things. And then as we're looking for other people to help out as well, you'll have a general idea of how the process works. So let's plan on that. So if I had to pick what I was going to do in the next 2 weeks, let's you and I connect and give that a shot and see what happens.
All right, beautiful. We'll do. Okay, thank you. All right. Juliet, Tony, you guys have anything for us?
Well, I'm still working on the things that I've been doing. So I mentioned, Harold already talked about the advocate stack, so no need to go into that. That will be up by the end of this week, so probably tonight. And then there's the consideration of the current Stacks code of conduct, the original one that needs to be put into a SIP process. And I've been doing a lot of research on other things, so I haven't gotten to that. I'm looking at doing research on tying in reclaiming the commons with NFTs and subtokens in the Stacks ecosystem. So that's something that I'm really excited about and going deep into and looking at what other communities are doing. So you'll be hearing more about that on the blog and forum that I put up blogs, so on Substack, although I hear that's not a good place to be these days, but they have good tools. So, and also on the forum. So look for that within the month to start seeing articles and essays on that. And that's me.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and all that common talk has me excited, as you know. Yeah, hopefully, maybe we get into a little bit more discussion on, you know, we tend to talk about how we kind of need and want some type of bounty model and things like this, and talked about journeys a little bit, and how we're talking about more system design focused bounty models in the advocates, and maybe a little bit later in the meeting we can discuss how commons can, you know, fit into that model, and maybe help us with some of this reclaiming the models, you know, reclaiming the commons built right into the advocates system design. But yeah, this is really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this work, and obviously with making sure that we're all have the same value system, you know, with the advocates. I'd love to work on that, bringing reclaiming the commons over to that. So that sounds great.
Yeah, I think it has a fundamental place in open source values. You know, yeah. But yeah, let's keep going. Tony, I don't know if you have anything for us, but feel free to go or pass, whatever floats your boat.
Largely just fly on the walling for exactly the type of vibe that y'all just delivered with regard to reclaiming the commons, and you opened with describing some of the efforts towards bringing like regenerative consensus building into running Stacks advocates. That's effectively why I'm here, to put my finger back to the wind of all that. That's super important to me, and I think it's going to be central to bringing utility to a lot of the interesting projects in the Stacks ecosystem, like CityCoins. I think there's a lot of interesting intersection there that has yet to be fully tapped, especially as we're looking at some of the DAO tooling creation that's coming up in a couple different areas of the ecosystem. So this is just me putting my finger to that wind again and saying hello.
Oh, thank you. No, beautiful. Yes. And yeah, please please tap into any discussion that happens in this meeting and clue us in on some of that tooling, right, that you may see have overlaps with this reclaiming the commons language. Yeah, but hopefully it'll come up soon in conversation. You tend to go fly through these as of late, but let's get into it. Let's see. I know we usually want to talk about this, and if we ever have any new folks, right? Jason and Juliet, this is kind of a good insight for them in terms of where we are with this. With those of us here, I don't know, do we want to restate any of this, Go?
Yeah, from what I recall, like the biggest thing we were leaving this open for is that people can still be nominated for the board. I don't think that process was closed out or changed. So we wanted to leave this up as a way to say, like, if if there is someone interested, or if there's someone that you think you would want to nominate for being a part of the board, or any discussion around the community. Well, actually, the community board seat was a separate issue, but yeah, that was why we kept this one open. Was basically that board nominations are still open as far as I know.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to jump in there. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think there also is something that we should be discussing coming up on this is really the process for obtaining the folks who are interested in board nominations and creating a protocol, a process for this. And I think that in some ways, this is something we could talk about with the advocates. Harold, maybe something that can be woven in there, so we can talk about this in that scenario. I don't know if that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it does actually. It's obviously an important role, and a big part of what we're trying to do with advocates is, really empower the edges of any of the community members, of all the community, to actually, have their voices accurately represented. And so this makes a whole lot of sense to weave in. It's just, exactly how, as I mentioned earlier, coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna, I think it's gonna become very important that we make some of our current structures in the advocate decision-making structures and advocate explicit, even if they're temporary. It's important to have it's important to have certain structures visible so that you can empower them. And I think that's some of the next steps, and it seems like it lends itself nicely to this important discussion on what a process might look like, how it might include those voice, or at least an important voice from that system design, to ensure that there's some accuracy, right, bleeding over from our system design and representation into what is this representation of the community. Maybe they're one and the same, who knows, but yeah, thank you kindly for the update, y'all. For anybody who's watching this recording, it'll be especially important, and especially if we can get these recordings up, right, Jason? But yeah, let's see. I think that was all the foundation updates because we recently closed some. And then we have some action stuff here.
Yeah, you don't even have to dive into that one. We can do a high level overview just from the issue list here. So Doxify theme, that covers the website that lists out any of the info in either the resources or the project management repository. And this came up just because after updating the logo, it's got a lot of, it doesn't fit 100%, or it'd be nice to make it look nicer, but it's nothing that was a need to do, just more something to keep track of and keep an idea on. And then the bottom one for the GitHub pages is kind of in the same boat. I think we have stacksgov.com available, and it would be really nice to use that. It just takes a little time to get that set up.
Yeah. Again, good for anybody watching this recording. And yeah, so we have recruiting SIP working group members here, which I think we're still going to be waiting on Jenny, but we have some time in a lot of ways to come together ourselves, or I get myself, Jason, and Juliet, and think about how we can expose folks to some of the ways we've worked. That'll be maybe a important point of process for folks coming in that make up more consideration or more cabs. These advisory boards that are important for the ecosystem. So I think that's about it, right? Unless I'm missing something, y'all. Yeah, we have some nice comments here, Juliet. All right. And we've had a little bit of comments from Juliet on code of conduct in the last meetings and earlier in this meeting. I think you pretty much updated on all this, right, Juliet?
Yeah, we're updated on this. So it's moving into the SIP process now. So that's where we're going with it.
Beautiful. Okay. And yeah, I think I just have a doc here. You can see where we are. Most recently, myself and Haas, with some really recent updates to that document, even going into the last part of January, and some notes even on some of the parts that are unfinished and updates. We have some foreshadowing notes there in the comments if anybody's interested. And like I said, we got into some interesting weeds around how to squeeze the most potential out of these windows of time that we can make sure PolicyKit pushes into the Discord, so that whether it's a bounty system or important decision task creation like model, like a bounty model, or it's important decision making, we want to ensure that there's windows of time built into the design that maximizes everybody knowing that an important decision is being made, or that an important project is underway in the bounty context. And in the decision-making context, we also want to ensure that PolicyKit is checking for legitimacy in different ways. And so while we can have transparency around, like, say, a dissent in a certain important decision, we can also make it so that it doesn't hurt or block the system in any way, or the system can be abused. And it's a way of really customizing Discord around a lot of on and off chain processes. And it's really showing us too, you can see in some of the work done in that doc, how we're really minimizing how much of these processes go on chain while still being able to reference them on chain, right? And it's something that we're finding is a unique benefit of PolicyKit. In what it is on and off chain combination of consensus flows and things like this. So yeah, really excited. We one of the points of emphasis that Haas keeps getting really excited about is the streamlining, right? The streamlining process of everybody's voice, as opposed to streamlining a process of a minimum amount of voices, like a boardroom or such, right? And we're really starting to see how some of that can start to flow in the system that we're building, where a lot of the official decision making should be really quick. It should be just a formality, right? 9 times out of 10, there shouldn't be so much deliberation going on in those processes, which should work really well for such a spread out ecosystem. But yeah, I'll shut up now. If there's any discussion on this, please. These are in action items because we'd love folks to get involved, plug in right into the doc, plug in right into any meetings that we have. So if there's anybody watching this recording or in this meeting currently, just reach out and, on Discord or what have you, and can plug you right into these sessions that we have. But I'll shut up now and get to some potential discussion items, if there's anything anybody wants to say there. And so I think we can do another overview, right, Jason? We went through this quite a few times now, the core group of us here. We can still maybe mention some things for folks that watch the recordings, but a lot of the notes cleanup Jason has mentioned already, and we're touching on first steps towards that. And I mentioned the bounties here, earlier in terms of how we're thinking about it. And I think that's a really good opportunity, Tony and Juliet, to get into some reclaiming the commons discussion, if you guys would like. We're kind of in the discussion session of the meeting. There's the governance lab initiative here that I skipped, but I think there's just a way to plug into some of the work that we're doing here in the Notion. There's a calendar and stuff that Ryder has gotten together that can keeps folks tapped into upcoming events and whatnot. And so I'll just touch on that. But I really love to get into some of this reclaiming the commons language. And I'm bringing it up in bounties, Jason, particularly, I know we've been excited about this for a while. And where we left off with the advocates, we've been having some pretty consistent meetings around coming up with the system for ourselves for this. We have a lot of good turnout and a lot of good input from people in the advocates. And we're right at the point now where we can probably flesh out a nice roadmap and post that up here. A part of that roadmap, and from our discussions, will hopefully be some type of template that folks can have just when starting up what we're calling a journey, or starting up what could potentially be like a bounty-like model around specific tasks that folks would like to see get done or get done themselves. And a part of that template we figured could be, something that really emphasizes a system design over product design in all of the different journeys or bounty, trees or process that gets started, and have that have this systems design approach really fractal out across the ecosystem, hopefully, or expose folks to some very inspiring models, right, that are conducive to Web3, conducive to open source values, can't be evil values. And one of the ways of doing that is in a template where folks are posting about starting a particular journey, right, is to ask them to think about commons, right, before it actually gets kicked off, to think about it in terms of what might be the different values circulating based on what you're trying to get accomplished, right? Whether it's docs procurement or clarity review, stuff. You can think of any work stream and think of a whole lot of upskilling that gets circulated, in terms of skill sharing, a whole lot of companionship and things like this. But I mentioned companionship because sometimes these more invisible values are a big part of what's circulating in the commons, along with this upskilling or this ability to get something to get monetary rewards. And so I really wanted to open up that to discussion here in terms of not just commons, right, but then looking at in a template, also looking about what other parts of the system design can you include in your template for what's going on, along with all of the different disciplines that might be applicable to your particular journey. But kind of asking folks to zoom out away from producing a product in these different bounties, which could possibly happen, or could be a little bit more tedious work, obviously, not necessarily product, but in there could be a very organic move towards folks pushing out products in these systems for the monetary incentive only. And we're hoping that getting folks to zoom out and looking at the commons, how the commons are distributed across a system that is, specific for the respective journeys, could go a long way in broadening folks' ideas around how to approach working with each other, how to organize around each other. One of the hopes is that when folks zoom out like this, that you get a picture of the abundance of value circulating, as opposed to an artificial scarcity built in with competition and wanting to get the monetary incentives. And we're really hoping that access to that and a certainty of access to this really shifts things away from self-preservation, away from potential gaming and other things like this that is conducive, or was almost logical to self-preservation, almost logical to scarcity. If it's built in, even if it's artificial, if it's built in, and people are going to act accordingly, right? And so that's some of the fundamental ways that I think commons and access to commons, plays a role in how folks organize themselves. And so, yeah, I just wanted to, I'll shut up there, but wanted to open that up for discussion. I know it was a lot.
I think you touched on exactly why I'm here, creating those regenerative structures that allow for kind of like additive participation rather than, I guess, sort of like the extractive gamification of person value that we're seeing everywhere from DeFi to Web3 gaming. I think there's a lot to be said a lot of value in what you've taught me in our time together, Harold, about matrilineal decision-making structures, generative decision-making structures, and how to apply the sort of heritage algorithms, the kind of way things once were that are tailored to how people work at a fundamental level, and taking those lessons and applying them to the space that we're operating in now. And I haven't identified the path to synergy there yet, but I think this is definitely a critical path to making non-extractive systems that are more, I guess, ethically and morally aligned with the heart of Web3 than the kind of hyper extractive gamification we're seeing right now. So I don't know if that's even makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's precisely why I'm always craving these type of conversations. The autonomy in DAOs, right? I always point to this as a very interesting word choice because it's arguably one of the main things we haven't figured out in terms of modern organization, modern governance systems. How to actually have authentic approaches to autonomy, authentic diplomacy without interference, right? I included some language in the code of conduct mentioned earlier that really comes from Jenny. For really first conversations around advocates and what was possible, and moving away from some of the systems we've had in the past at Stacks, she communicated a sentiment about just allowing folks to feel like they're going to be taken care of, right? And I think this speaks to a certain amount of certainty that is important and fundamental when real autonomy is present. There's a feeling, a tangible feeling and certainty of the autonomy, the empowerment to sustain that autonomy, and having a foundation of abundance, having a feeling, a felt access to commons that are beyond monetary, that are circulating, and that you have access to without anybody processing it before you get access to it, funneling it or controlling it before you get access to it, but just direct access. I think is a fundamental way of communicating this certainty that it is part and parcel to autonomy in the sense of if that autonomy is really felt, there's a whole lot of potential to squeeze out of that, right? Whereas if the autonomy isn't genuinely felt, right, like in our conventional structures, you can get these blockers to conflict resolution, because it almost makes sense to be so focused on self-preservation, right? Because of artificial scarcity, because of a lack of genuine autonomy, right? And access to commons. So I think this is a fundamental distinction between some of our conventional systems and what we're trying to do with reclaiming the commons, right? Juliet is shift this feeling of certainty, really speak to autonomy by empowering voices, empowering access to commons, that where the commons hopefully are these values that aren't being extracted, like you're saying, Tony. There's no points of just pure extraction. There's this is also something that kind of hopefully is a beautiful result of these journeys, and thinking of them as system design as opposed to product design is, folks can, if you zoom out of the system in a way that you're really trying to be sincere about the autonomy of the generators of value, or the users of it, any given open source code that comes out of that comes out of these journeys, which could be a big part of what makes up the commons, right? Open source code. Models of decommodification, right? Models that show you can start getting revenue streams before even having to think about setting a price, before having to think about gaining a core base. And so by the time you do get to those points, you're thinking about your models differently, because you've started to get some revenue streams coming in on the research and development side, because you're thinking about sustainability, you're thinking about a system, not necessarily a product. It can speak to a whole lot of transitional jobs, investments, a whole lot of different things, right? But it's and you can get very specific with that. But just all to say, if we can start to build in models of decommodification of data, particularly, right? It really, I think, is conducive to open source Web3, beginnings, where these models of decommodification can fractal out, and we don't have a nasty data extractive economy under our internet, right? We've had this self-organizing, decommodified, Web3 emerging. And so, yeah, there's a lot more to be said there, but I kind of just wanted to get that out in the conversation. And it can't, for every journey, it may not be the case. It may not be data schemas applicable, or it may not be it may be more of a reach, some of the language that I'm using, but I think it may be even in some of those situations, we might have some new emergent things that make sense with this version of Web3 that I'm trying to communicate. But hopefully, this can be a starting point to exposing folks to models like this. But I'll shut up.
Nah, please don't. There's so much food for thought there around the sort of like the disintermediation of value generation and dissemination. Decommodifying it so it's not just this tradable quantum of human essence. Instead, it's more bespoke value that means something to the communities that the value is local to. And really defining that I don't know. When you talk about bounty programs for Stacks advocates, right? My head immediately jumps to local community bounties for Citicoin DAOs, for community improvement projects, for other services that are relevant in a hyperlocal space that folks have the bandwidth to dedicate themselves to, but don't necessarily have the narrative or the pathway to being recognized for that community value contribution. And when you have pathways that do exist to help them recognize their value and contribution to the community, I think oftentimes the pathways are opaque. You know, the requirements are opaque. The decision-making structures that award value for their contributions are opaque. And I think what you propose from consensus building structure removes that opacity, so folks understand how to participate in a system and how their value is being recognized and respected, and what their obligations for respecting the value and contributions of others are, so that you have less opportunity for abuse, less opportunity for information asymmetry, and instead of coming from a position of scarcity and looking upward and saying, please, may I have some more? Instead, you're saying, hey, I'm participating in this. Enable my participation, and creating that positive sum engagement model that I'm not proposing that I have any understanding of how to get there, but that's where you inspire me to dive deeper and learn into.
Oh, thank you. And the same for all of y'all. This language that Juliet kindly brought up of reclaiming the commons, and Jason has mentioned very similar things that you've mentioned. Some of the Citicoin stuff, and it's it's important to, like you said, for us to name PAVs, expose folks to PAVs, that ultimately are empowering themselves. These PAVs to empowering ourselves. And kind of just reminding folks how much discretion we have, particularly in this space, to build our own structures. But yeah, I'll shut up there. There's a lot I think that we can get into, when it comes to research and development models that kind of can speak to decommodification of local and regional data. It's particularly in the Citicoin context, it's I think really exciting to think about the potential of local and regional economies taking on research and development models, right? And managing and owning their own data. I think there's such a dissonance in selling your data once you have the ability to manage and control it, that it can really speak to possibilities in open source code, where it almost looks like a blanket investment going on in the space, blockchain, open source, and other places as well, right? But if local and regional economies can offer these focused research and development, or very specific tooling around very specific local and regional economies, I think it can really show how powerful these models of decommodification can have, because technically open source code, right? It's there, right, for everybody to use after they've been invested in this blanket way. But there's something, I think there's a very unique opportunity for local and regional economies to, on their own terms, decide what, data they're comfortable with selling that. And, the investment for the tooling that, actually gets you to that data, I think, that with that tooling being open source, folks can do whatever they want with that tooling after fact. But if they're conducive to, this circulating of unalienated value, whatever generators of value pick up that tooling, are likely to be hyper aware of this. And whenever there's an attempt to commodify the data using the tooling that was designed for decommodification of data, I think there can be an interesting, in code tangible conversation that starts to emerge between whether it's data scientists, software engineers, the local communities, and there could be maybe there's Citicoin or something like this that's important in that equation somewhere in terms of connecting these local and regional communities to this type of systems building, right? But yeah, I'll shut up. But yeah, let's continue. Thank you, Conley, for all your time. Just listening, Juliet, Jason, Tony is too. But yeah.
One thing I'll tell you, Harold, is you don't have to worry about shutting up, because a lot of what you're talking about and a lot of these ideas that we're going over, and the reason that things for me, at least personally, are so exciting in this space is a lot of the work that you're doing towards these goals. And I think they're similar to how Tony feels, and definitely how I feel is a lot of this is a hard thing to solve for. But the efforts that are going forward right now, the things that are changing, the progress that's been made since launch and since we started these meetings, like I see a lot of positive and really good work coming out of the group and out of the residence program and out of the advocates program. Like I just love seeing all this come together. So I definitely encourage you to keep it up and keep telling us what because we all have a different perspective here. And bringing that in helps us think of like, well, how would I do that myself, or how would I do that otherwise?
Yeah. And I think some of these notions are and some of these concepts, it's beautiful to get this feedback from yourself and others. And a lot of times I'm just like I'm craving like feedback, right, on if some of these things make sense. But when I think of a restaurant model, right, it's kind of like notorious for being the money pit of business models, right? Like it's like the boat of business models, for how hard it could be. And it just seems like we can unlock ourselves from some of these conventional, come from top down business model thinking, extractive business model thinking. We kind of can't bring ourselves out of the box when it comes to just thinking about a restaurant business. What is a different way of doing the restaurant business and or business model, right? And when I think of all of the research and development that can go into packaging and material development and bioplastics, foils, leathers, all these things that have been exposed to digital fabrication, it seems like, and now these software, tooling and governance tooling, there can be a whole lot of, research and development and revenue streams coming in, right? Before you even setting a price for your food, or before you having to think about some of those conventional things of building up a core base for your customer base, the actual labor of getting that food out there. If revenue streams are already coming in before you get to that phase, then all of a sudden, when you do get to that phase, you're unlocked. And now you can start focusing on things you're passionate about, whether it's experimenting with the food, feeding people, bringing people together in discussion, whatever, right? And it seems like a powerful means of unlocking folks, right, from conventional models of commodification of what they're passionate about. And it just kind of feels like that can be extrapolated across fields and industries, including very software heavy fields where if you're thinking in system design, a lot of things can be plugged right into this language of sustainability, whether it's administration or these other things. And I think that can really speak tooling wise to the folks that are currently just doing this blanket investment into the space, right? But yeah. Thank you kindly for the discussion, y'all. And we lost Tony, but yeah, I see we're at 10:52 now, and some of these things like to our Wampum Steam update, I've given some good links here around how we're thinking about some of this material development stuff. Really, I can't express how good these links are if anybody's interested in some of the digital fabrication and material development stuff that you guys hear me talking about so much. And we have some important stuff around publisher and secretary that I think dovetails with some of the meeting notes and cleanup that Jason is always updating us about. Fireside chat, I have another link, a really good link here that'll hopefully be a guide for our next get together with advocates and maybe some folks from Kernel this time. This is something I already shared with Juliet. There's some excerpts from a really good book around indigenous modes of governance, organization, consensus, these things. And so hopefully that'll guide our next session. And some of these updates can include some nice little short video blurbs of what we've been up to in those firesides. But yeah, that's about it for the discussions. And yeah, thank you kindly. If there's anything else y'all want to talk about, I'm here for sure.
No, I don't think anything else to cover on my side. And I've got to jump because we're going into a City Coins Builders call, but definitely appreciate hearing from everybody and getting back together. Good to always, I'm glad you're really, taking care of this and running the meetings. I think you're doing a great job, Harold, Juliet, always good to see you. Tony, sorry you had to drop, but I'm sure you'll hear this later. And just appreciate you guys and all the work you're doing. I mean, I think it's absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Jason. We feel the same, Jason. It's always beautiful to hear you and get these updates. I'm glad you're pushing through all of this, sickness and all of this. So, yeah, thank you.
The best way to look at it is this too shall pass. But on that note, I'm going to jump. Definitely much appreciate you guys. Take care, and we will talk soon.
Beautiful, Jason. Thank you. Thank you, Juliet. Right.
Thank you.